Hello and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Candace. I'm your host, Candace Mama. This guest had me at hello. Her name is Kate Gray, and her story is truly fit for a Hollywood blockbuster. She has been voted as one of Australia's top visionaries and entrepreneurs. She's spoken alongside people like Gary Vaynerchuk and Deepak Chopra, and she has built multiple seven-figure businesses. So I cannot wait to dive into Kate's incredible story. But before I do, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can have access to this knowledge. And without further ado, here's the phenomenal Kate Gray. Hello, Queen. How are you?
How are you?
Good. You look beautiful as always.
So do you. Oh. It's so nice to connect, like not on the summit.
When you aren't doing all your magic, I was like, you had me at hello. You really did.
Yay, that's an absolute honor. Thank you.
No, but it's one of those things that sometimes you meet someone, right? Even if it's virtual, over a conference, whatever it may be. And there's a vibe or an energy or vibration about that person that you're like, oh, I like this person, like your soul just resonates, right? I call it like your soul tribe. And then that person starts saying things or, they start sharing something about themselves where you're like, this is why I like you.
Totally. I fully agree. 100%. That was exactly my experience as well. I was like, oh, this is just like one of my people. It was cool, really cool. It's nice. It doesn't happen that often.
It doesn't. That's why when it does, it's so special, right? Like that's my girl.
Agreed. Yes, 100%.
Oh, but thank you. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to me today, because I heard pieces of your story. And in preparing for today's interview, of course, I went and I researched and I listened, and I realized that the pieces I heard were just like the tip of the iceberg. Just like this tiny bit. And I was like, yes. Whoa. I mean, your story is, you've lived so many lives, right? And you've had so many journeys you've been on to get you to this moment where you are considered like one of the top entrepreneurs and leaders in Australia. But sometimes what I find with human nature, right? We see someone like Kate Gray, like, okay, she got all these awards. She's worked with all these incredible people. And you're like, oh, she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Like people make really strange assumptions. Like, oh, she was just born knowing. She just knew, and that was far from the case for you. That was like so far from the case that I just thought, holy crap. Like that's what I thought when I was listening to your story. And for those people who don't know, Kate, I really want us to start at the beginning. And I want to preface it by saying by the age of 18, you had been married and you had joined a cult. So I want us to get to pre that. How did you get to that moment in your life?
Wow, that is like, it's so weird to hear you say it, and exactly what you said. Like, I feel like I've lived so many lifetimes, which is amazing. So I got to that point because growing up, two things happened to me that were very significant that I remember so clearly. First was seeing the movie Cry Freedom, which is about the apartheid in South Africa. And I remember being devastated because I lived in this tiny little island like called Tasmania, the bottom of Australia. And I was so ignorant to the fact that racism even existed. I had no idea. And so then to see this movie at 8 years old, it felt just like a giant smash in the face around like the realities of actually what humans were capable of. It was just so far removed from what I thought we should be as human beings. And so I remember locking myself in my room for 2 days at 8 years old and writing essays about how I could potentially end human suffering, which is really weird now I think about it. I'm not sure if I came up with any solutions because I don't really remember what I wrote, but I do remember like pages and pages. And then that married with the fact my uncle was a devotee of Osho. He was a sannyasi and he lived in Pune and also in Oregon with Osho. And he used to send me letters back with Osho's teachings, which were quite outside the box. And they started to get me to think about, well, why do we suffer? Which was what Cry Freedom got me to think about. Why do we suffer? Why do humans do these awful things to themselves? And then Osho got me to think about, well, what's the meaning of existence? Is there a meaning? How can I live a more fulfilled life? And then I went searching, and searching kind of ended me up in a cult. That's probably the best way to describe it. It was the search for meaning.
Oh, I love that you're like searching led me there. And I think it's true. And you know what it is? I find it always so interesting how conscious, because I mean, a very pivotal moment happened when I was around 9 too. And I always find it interesting how conscious you are at that age, how you can actually comprehend and search, really, because that, for me, that was one of the most pivotal moments in my life, of understanding the complexity of human beings, not in a way you can articulate at that age, of course, but it's like in hindsight, when I look at myself in that age, when I look at myself and how I was thinking at that age, it like blows my mind, because I'm like, whoa, child, you had a lot going on. You know?
Yeah, hell yes, totally. It's amazing because, like, I think we kind of, in this day and age, sometimes children are being forced to grow up a little bit quickly. But then when I look back to how, like, you and I were thinking at that age, like, we are way more, I think, tapped in than we're kind of given credit for as well. So there's this kind of dance between, are we forcing kids to grow up too quickly, or are we not recognizing them for, I guess, the source of wisdom that they actually can be?
Oh, that's powerful. And I want to go back, because around that age as well, you had your uncle who was this incredibly positive influence in your life, and he instilled all this greatness within you. But you were also growing up in a very chaotic home environment where you had a very strained relationship with your father. So how did that play out for you, living in these two parallels at the same time?
Yeah, it's a really good distinction. I definitely feel like I had two parallels. Like, on one side was my uncle and my mum, who were always very positive, you can do anything. And on the other side, there was my father, who was like, you're hopeless, you're a gunner, you'll never achieve anything. You know, I think I mention all the time in the summits, you know, he always used to call me as useless as tits on a bull. That was like his favorite line for me. And what's interesting though is, as chaotic as that was, and how it really did leave me with this sense of I'm not good enough, like so strong, which I think drove the searching, because I was coming from this place of trying to figure out, I guess, or make sense of why this happened to me, and why I was the why person. I was looking for the why. So as much as that was chaotic, it also in the end became my greatest gift, because when my father died in my early 20s, it was the thing that shook me out of the state of, I guess, trauma that I was in from that. And later on, I don't really talk about this, but I'll share it. I actually found out he was not my real father. And I found out through a psychic in a reading 3 years after he died.
Oh,
yeah.
That gave me chills. Like, my skin, when you said that, my skin literally just lit up. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
The fact that you gave yourself the room, right, to even look at your father through the lens of compassion when he was sick, and he was, after he had put you through, right? Because I'm going to still refer to him as your father, because I mean, even when you find out, right, he was this pivotal figure that moved through your life. And how that scarring and that wounding sticks in your mind as a child, and how it makes you seek, because you share a story, and I related to it so strongly, that the reason you even got married at 18 was that sense of belonging, right? And you were searching, and finally someone saw you, and it's like, oh, this person sees me. And I know how that's played out in my own life. I grew up in a very abusive home myself, and I remember, you know, although I also had this contrasting parallel of I can become anything, I can do anything, you know, and I'm going to achieve something in life, there was also this very crippling feeling of belonging that I needed and that I wanted. And so that played out in my romantic relationships as to how I chose romantic partners and what I attributed as an adequate romantic partner, right? And if I felt safe with them, if I felt they'd protect me. And even if it wasn't in the healthiest way, it was in a way that resonated with my soul at that time, right? And did you feel that when you got married?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the thing with the marriage was the cult. Like, it was this sense of belonging to a community where, and the reason I joined the cult in the first place was I was seeking for answers for why do we suffer? Why does, who is God? Why does God make these things happen? And they gave me definitive answers. And like now, 17, 18, 19 years on, I'm like, well, that was a bit foolish, because the more I go on this path, the more I realize I don't really know anything. But at the time I wanted concrete answers, and they gave them to me. So yes, he saw me and I felt like I belonged, but so did the larger community. And I'd never really had that before. I always felt like the odd one out. I was the weirdo that read Shakespeare in my room, while all my cousins and sister were all playing sport. I was the overweight one. I was always the odd one out. So to have this community that accepted me was really powerful at the time. And that's kind of how I ended up there.
Yeah. And also you had to escape as well, which is like, I mean, your story could literally be a movie, because it's just, there's so many moments, right? Which are just like holding your breath moments that, would be seen in a movie where you're like, oh my gosh, are they going to make it?
Yeah, pretty much.
So tell us about that. Tell us about, when you finally did get to a space where you're like, I can't be here anymore. And then having to escape that, and what then transpired until your dad was in hospital.
Yeah, I think I didn't really get to the point of I can't do this anymore until my dad died. Up until then, I was quite delusional. I'm very resilient, so I can put up with extreme amounts of discomfort for long periods of time before making change, which is a blessing as an entrepreneur and also a curse as a human being. So I don't think until he died, I was really ready to change. Like, there were things that happened, like, and I don't talk about this a lot either, but my sister's car got blown up by a drug dealer because I owed him $40. Like, just crap like that. Like, my life was like train spotting. It was like chaos, living on the streets. Even at that point, I didn't really I was still kind of delusional. I was very good at escaping in my mind and creating fantasies because I kind of had to. But when my dad died, and literally I remember he took his last breath, I just remember being slapped in the face with what I was doing with my life, and that if I didn't clean my shit up, I would be like him very soon.
Oh, that is it gave me chills, because it is true, right? I find myself to actually have a very similar personality profile in some ways, where I have an ability to shut down my emotions and also just get through. That's my thing. I can get through anything, which is, yes, it is that core of resilience, right? But I think I spoke to someone who was my mentor and life coach in some ways. And so she said to me, she's like, have you ever thought that was your coping mechanism for growing up in chaos? Because as a child, when you grow up in a heightened state, right, and you constantly have to be aware of the person who's going to hurt you, in this case it was your dad, in my case it was someone else, and you've got to stay alert, because as a child you kind of understand that if I misread this person's energy and their emotions, I'm in trouble. So I need to get out of the situation, right? And then as you grow up, you don't realize this is a pattern of survival you've built, because you're also not allowed to express emotion, right? You're not allowed to express weakness. You're not allowed to express these things that are going to get you into deeper trouble or into this chaotic state. And so as an adult, you become this incredibly resilient person sometimes, and it doesn't always play out that way. But then you start learning how to shut down your emotional being to cope with this chaos around you, because you're so used to coping with chaos, right? And then it doesn't, as you said, it does not serve you in the human capacity, at least, of existence.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, as an entrepreneur, super useful to a point. However, as a human being, not so useful at all. And so I think I'm grateful. I found psychedelics and plant medicine and Buddhism, because when you sit at a wall and you stare at it for 11 hours, which is what we used to do, it was our Zazen practice, you can't escape your emotions there. If you could, you would literally be like some crazy supernatural ninja. I don't think 10 days in a row, 11 hours a day staring at a wall, you can escape it. You have to face it. There's no way around it.
Geez. So Kate, people are going through a lot right now. So this is the first time for some people that they've been put in a situation of complete uncertainty, complete chaos, having to restructure the way they move through life and how they relate to themselves and to other people. And I mean, you had this, sequence of events that just kept transpiring. And then you changed your life and you became this incredible human being. How did you do that? Like, how did you get to the state? Because, you know, it's one thing to acknowledge that, okay, you know, my dad has passed on and I need to change my life right now. But it's another thing to actually do the actions it takes to change your life. So what did that look like for you? What was that shift and then that process like for you?
Yes. Yeah. The first shift was just taking radical responsibility for everything in my life, like shifting all, like, I can't change what happened to me. I can't change they're living on the streets. I can't change my addiction. I can't change my dad. But what I can do is I'm in control of how I show up in this moment. So it's like the trauma will only stay with me if I keep carrying it. So I had to let it go. And I go, that is not me. And I'm not going to let that define me anymore. And then take responsibility for who I am now in this moment, because I can change that. I can be present with that. The second part was just committing to action, even if it was wrong. Even if it sent me up the wrong way and up a garden path and I hit a brick wall, it didn't matter. I just promised myself I was going to stay in motion and in action, in perfect action. And in the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, he calls it failing forward. So I just committed to failing forward constantly. And I knew that eventually it would work out if I stayed in motion. If I went stagnant and I fell back into the trauma or back into the emotion or back into the process, I didn't seem to move. And it wasn't that I ignored the process. I did a lot of work through my emotions, through meditation, but I did it in my meditation. I did it in my plant medicine ceremonies. I didn't do it in my everyday life. I would just car park it and visit it. It was like, you send your car to a mechanic, right? You don't try and tinker with your car every day. You wait till you send it for a tune-up to the mechanic. Every day it drives and does the things it needs to do. Well, I looked at myself a little bit like a car. I tinkered on myself and worked on myself in those environments and containers. But in everyday life, I just took action, even if it was imperfect, continually until I got there.
Oh, I love that. I love the idea of taking action, because I think in the spiritual community, which I've loved for a very long time, but I've had to start redefining it for myself, at least. No, you know, no offense to anyone out there, but I feel like in some ways it promotes inaction. And the fact that you are speaking about, you have to take action, I think is something that a lot of people may resist, because they're going to think, no, but Kate, like, I'm told that if I want to attract things into my life, I just need to meditate. I just need just these things, meditation, affirmation, and things will gravitate towards me. But I think the biggest key to, you know, making that visualization and affirmations work is the action, right? Because 90%, in my opinion, is action. What have you found?
100%. Like, even like Dr. Joe Dispenza, who talks extensively about, like, I guess, manifesting as if it's already here, you still show up and act as if it's already here. You don't sit and just visualize it. You live your life as if what you desire is already here. Because the more we focus on what we want without backing it up with action, the more we just notice the gap of it not being there, which actually makes manifestation not work. So the action's essential.
And when you spoke about noticing the gap, right? Because that's what would happen with me. And I think I actually believe that in the spiritual community, or at least in my personal experience of it, I needed to go through all the phases. I needed to be the most devout, you know, meditator and like affirmer and everything. And then it was like, okay, this is not working for me. You know, constant positivity doesn't work for me. This doesn't work for me. And then I kind of tinkered with it, and I took away this and I added this until it became a formula that I saw results with. And I think that's what's so important. It's the questioning, right? And I think for me, when I encountered Buddhism teachings, the one thing I really loved, at least from where I went for practice, was the one teacher said, with Buddhism, you have to question. How will you know it's for you if you never question it, right? If you just become a devout devotee of Buddhism without knowing why, you're less likely to stay devout. And I thought, I was like,
100%.
That is good.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so good. I could not agree more. Like, on it, like, that is exactly on point. We have, and I spent a bit of time with Mooji. Do you know Mooji?
No.
Oh, he's a bhakti kind of, I guess, the Ramana Maharishi lineage of, like, Advaita, which is like non-dualism. And so I spent a bit of time in his ashram in Portugal, and he said the same thing. He's like, question me, question everything, question the mind, question your thoughts, like question it, keep questioning until there's no question. So I think when we just, because some people are so, and I get it, me too. Like I've been through all the phases. I've done all the spiritual stereotypes ever possibly created. I've been them all. The feathers in the hair, the tie-dye, the mala beads, you know, all of it. I've done it all. And I think what happens is that we so desperately want to relieve ourselves from the pain and the trauma that we're looking for a savior. And unfortunately, many in the community, without knowing it, or maybe they know it, I don't know, they play into this savior archetype. And many people then just blindly follow these other people, and they lack this ability to critically think and question. And then they end up really sad and alone. So if I can share anything and just echo what you said and what your Buddhist teacher said, question everything all of the time. The only savior that exists is you. You are your savior. That's it.
Wow, that gave me chills. You know, the idea of savior, right? I think in many ways, so many of us, I haven't met in my life, at least, a lot of people who don't struggle with unworthiness issues at some point or another, whether they come from like perfect homes or not. There is still that element of unworthiness. And what unworthiness leads to is, I don't know all the answers within myself. Therefore, I need someone else or something else outside of me to tell me what to do. And I think that's why cults are really good. Or like, you know, when you go to like, you know, these really radical places where no matter what religious practice it is, whereby they say to you, I know the answers, you keep following me in this direction and the car will get you to where you need to go. And if you're not someone who's naturally curious, it's so much easier to be like, okay, I don't need to make any decisions. I don't need to do anything of my own volition. I can just listen to that person. And if they're wrong, then it's not my fault, right? Yeah. Because I think that's the beauty of it. But the beauty of surrendering your power is you never have to take what you refer to as radical responsibility.
Exactly. It's the ultimate spiritual bypass. It's completely bypassing existing.
And I love that you call that radical responsibility, because I think that's the one thing that because I mean, you help people create 7-figure businesses. And the one thing I find very interesting is a lot of people will give you a lot of excuses. Kate, I'm a woman. Women don't have equality. Women can't do this, right? Or I don't have the financial capacity to invest in you to teach me this wisdom that you spend all this time accumulating. So what do you find is the biggest thing that holds people back from investing in themselves or even investing in their businesses?
Yeah, such a good question. There's so many answers. Like, I think it's literally, if we strip it right back, there's a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's like the guy that made mindfulness trendy. He's like a little tiny Zen monk, and I love him so much. He's Vietnamese. He's amazing. Even listening to him speak is like a hug. Like, he's just super cool. And he speaks about all things that cause inaction, or all fears, or I guess sabotages, can be linked back to the fear of death. So why I say that is, if we link it to survival, so the brain is a survival organism. So anything that moves outside of, I guess, identity coherence or reality coherence, which obviously needs to happen in order for people to achieve their goals, the brain is going to go into, that's a threat, my survival's at risk, I am going to create whatever excuse I need to keep this body in this place, in this identity coherence, in this reality coherence right now, to stop them. And it could be money, it could be their partner, it could be gender equality, it could be anything. But ultimately that will depend on the person's like belief systems, their ideologies, how they grew up. But ultimately it's just fear of survival. That's what it boils all down to.
Oh, I've never thought of it like that. I've always looked at it from, I think, the symptom standpoint. I mean, I always knew there was a root cause, right? But I never thought of it as being survival, because I think when we feel our survival is threatened, that's where we pump the brakes, right? That's where we feel like, oh no, okay, you are leading me into a forest I've never walked into before, and I am not coming with you.
Yep, 100%. 100%.
So what have you found is what do people have to do, or what practices do they have to adopt to overcome this very basic survival instinct that they have?
Yeah, there's a few different things. Like you can go old school, like I guess full immersion method, and go and sit a plant medicine ceremony and face off with death, which I did, which was terrifying. Or you can go the better route, the easier route, which is just like more like, I guess, an aversion kind of therapy, where you slowly expose yourself to feeling unsafe, whether that be through physical fitness. It actually doesn't matter, because all parts affect the whole, like as above, so below, everything is touching each other. So you could do it through being in the gym. You could do it through practicing awkward conversations. You could do it through maybe going without makeup. You could do it through, doing Facebook Lives. It doesn't matter. But if you slowly expose yourself to feeling under threat and you survive, what happens is the brain starts to shift and new neural pathways start to form, and you start to find safety in areas that once were deeply uncomfortable and a threat to survival. And then over time, your entire reality changes.
That is powerful. So it's like facing your fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like doing things that consciously frighten you, and realizing that, hey, I survived that thing, like that Facebook Live. And I know like a lot of people have a big issue with public speaking, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also that fear of, what are other people going to say? Like, oh my goodness, the tribe is going to vote me out. I won't be socially included, and therefore they're not going to feed me. And if they don't feed me, I'm going to die. You know what the Instagram algorithm. That's what Instagram does to us, because
it does.
I'm going to post this video or picture, whatever it may be. And if the community doesn't like it, they're going to kick me off, and I'm going to die because the community doesn't think I'm good enough.
Yeah. Totally.
It's mind-blowing. It's like, it's one of those things that we go back to our evolutionary aspects of survival, and we think we're so past it. We like, oh, I mean, I do not like, I am a highly evolved human being, and I've got my, master's degree in this, and I've got my accounting degree in whatever. And yet we also come back to the very basic human needs of inclusion, of feeling secure in our lives. And when those things are under threat, those alarms go off in our brains, right?
Yes.
And until you actually spoke about it, I didn't actually even think of it, to be honest. I just thought, oh, people are making excuses for why they cannot do this, right?
Yeah.
And
It's interesting. Yeah, sorry, I'm what's interesting to mention, and you may be the same. I'm not that I'm into categorizing. I'm not super, I like to know things like human design, and then I like to break all the rules and do the opposite, just because I'm a rebel. I don't like people telling me who I am. But one thing that's always stuck with me is there's a Freudian term called Sigma personalities. And so for a Sigma, we find connection not how normal people find connection. So for me, small talk or connecting in a social environment where everyone sits around drinking cacao is my worst nightmare. I would rather stay home by myself with my dog forever than do that. What is really valuable for me is small, deep connections with people that I'm like, oh, they're my people. Like conversations with, somebody that I feel like can meet me, and not in an egotistical sense, but can bring value, and I can bring value. Like it's just, we can fill each other's cups from the overflow of our own cups, rather than just dalliances and social connection for the sake of it, which different personality categories love. Like they love it. Extroverts, oh my gosh, they're all about it. I can't think of anything worse. So I think that is a benefit, although for a long time I thought there was something wrong with me, but it's actually become a great asset.
Wow, I love that. I didn't even think of it. Because I think for a long time, because I am such an easy connector, I have an ability to tune into people and be able to, have conversations with people, but not all conversations feed me. So then I find myself being the giver of that energy, and I get very little in return sometimes. And I think it's only now, I don't know if it's because I'm getting to my, turning 30 this year, or if it's because of all the experiences I've had, that I'm like, hey, I've always categorized myself as an extrovert because I'm good at it. I'm good at connection and I'm good at giving, but it's not necessarily what feeds me. right? Because it's also how you get recharged. It's not just what you give, but how you get recharged in return. And when I started doing that, I was like, hey, like if I'm going to spend social time, I really needed to be, like, as you said, reciprocal. I need to, are you filling my cup? Am I filling your cup? And I think that's when I get energized, when I leave an interaction. And that's why I love doing these podcasts, because I usually leave these interactions feeling so engaged and so energized and so ready to face life. And then there's some moments where I'm just like, I leave an interaction and I get home and I'm like, oh, Lord.
You need to lay down. I feel you 100%. It's like so funny. I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but I thought I was an extrovert for a long time. But what I learned was I learned it to survive as a child, when actually I'm completely introverted. Until I came to that understanding, life was hell.
No, I think we're very similar in that way, that because I mean, and as speakers, right, like we tend to be able to go on stage and give, and it is energizing in that capacity, because you're giving a value exchange, right? And the fact that you can, like, there's one person in that audience that may leave a little different, that you're going to spark a change or a thought pattern. I mean, that is so energizing. But even after that, you step away and you've given. Like, you're not stepping away and skipping through the hills. You're stepping away and you're like, oh.
Yep. Oh yeah, 100%.
No,
yeah.
I love that identification, because I think sometimes we get given these roles in life, whether it's within our family units, in our friendships, wherever we are. And it's like, Kate, you are this person. You are, you are assertive, you are the extrovert of the group, you are this. And a lot of the time I find it's very interesting how we struggle to maneuver ourselves out of those roles, and how uncomfortable it is, right? You're like, but I'm supposed to be this extrovert, and I'm supposed to be this, and if I'm not, and I'm saying that I'm not an extrovert, then who the hell am I?
Yeah, totally. And then everyone around you is freaking out because you're no longer what they thought you were. And it becomes crazy.
It does. So how did you deal with that change? Because I know you mentioned a number of times in your life where you've lost people in your life that you thought were your friends or were very close to you. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, it got easier every time. Oh, it's such a good question. I don't know if there's like one thing or one methodology or one system that I used. I definitely feel like I had for a long time a very strong presence of a Zen master in my life. And so every time everything fell away, like he was definitely an anchor of familiarity for me. And then my meditation practice and my spiritual practice of being able to just be present with what is, even in deep discomfort, made it much more bearable. But every time it did get easier. But it was really a mind screw for a very, very long time. Like I reckon I've probably outgrown, or they've outgrown me. I don't know what happened. At least maybe 12, 13 times in my life, just completely new environments and ecosystems.
Wow. Because it's not easy. It really isn't. I think when people transition out of your life, it's because sometimes you go through that, again, it triggers that unworthiness, unlovable, whatever it is in your brain. And it's like, hey, why did you leave? And I always used to joke before I became even more conscious and, got on this journey was, sometimes for me, it was easier to actually mourn a breakup, because it was like a part of me felt like it was going to end. Like there was always this mutual understanding of like, oh, this may not work out. But when it was friendships, it would hit me so hard, because I'm like, you're not supposed to leave me.
Yes, 100%. I'm the same. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Like humans are so peculiar. I think now I'm okay. There's an old poem that says people come into your life for a lifetime, a reason, or a season.
Yes.
And so now I'm like, okay, cool. This person's a reason. Are they a season? Are they a lifetime? Like I'm cool with it all changing. But I think it's like a muscle. You get used to it as it happens more and more. It's a part of evolution. Some people are lucky enough to have friends from childhood. Like my partner has friends from childhood. That's just not my thing. I've never been that way. And I'm okay with that.
And I love that, because I also find that I don't know, I feel like this could be the same with you. The better the relationship with myself got, the less the relationships that would fall away became as life defining, right? Because I also realized that I did not have a good relationship with me. Therefore, when people would leave my life, it became a very like internalized feeling, because I was like, oof, you know, it would trigger that wound of like rejection or abandonment or unworthiness. And when I started getting better with me, which I'm not 100% there yet, but I'm getting better and better and better at it, it was like, hey, no, but I didn't have boundaries with this person, or I didn't articulate my needs with this person, or, you know, this falling away just showed me which parts of myself I was neglecting. So I don't know if that was the same journey with you.
100%. I lacked serious boundaries to probably about a year ago. So fully owning that. And my relationships reflected that. Like when I spoke in the summits, I lost a large amount of my wealth at the beginning of 2020. I got fired by most of my clients. It was perfect, like amicable, no worries. But all those relationships, client and personal, reflected the fact that I really struggled with boundaries. Even the losing of the money was my boundaries issues, my desire to still belong and to still be seen in a certain way. And like it all falling apart was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, and I completely echo that. I think, I don't know, there was an energy about 2020. There was something that it came with where, I mean, I started analyzing my boundaries. And I think it came from a number of aspects, right? There was the sense of loss that I think collectively we felt. And then I also think it was that sense of introspection, because all of a sudden you had to incubate and there was no, you know, external like energizing force. And I know in South Africa, we weren't allowed to go out. We weren't allowed to, you know, be in nature, nothing. So all of a sudden, all you had was you, the four walls that surrounded you. If you had a garden, you were very fortunate. But you had to really start asking yourself questions and how people related to you, whether that was your clients, whether that was your friends, whether that was your partner. And if that was something you wanted, and if that was something you needed at that time. And all of a sudden, boundaries just became like a doop, 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 doop. You know, I was like, oh my goodness, my house is so open. Like every window's open, the doors are open, the lawn is not secure. You know, anyone can just come do a run by.
Right there with you.
And it's interesting because I also heard you say in an interview that, you know, just because you operate from a heart center and you want to work with entrepreneurs that are going to make an impact in the world, it doesn't make you a walkover. And I thought, ooh, that is so good. Because how many times in the spiritual, and whenever you're a spiritual being or you do work that involves some sort of social awareness, people relate to you differently. They look at you and they're like, oh, well, Kate, why should I pay you? Because you're supposed to be adding to humanity, right? You're supposed to be the spiritual being. And I love the fact that firstly, your business is called Boss Bitch Business. And secondly, you're like, I don't take shit. I love that.
100%. Like I called it Boss Bitch for a reason, because I knew like my background was being very much the mentor for all the conscious spiritual entrepreneurs. So I did that intentionally because what I saw, there was this massive disconnect with a whole element of people's humanity. So I'll just tell a little story so I can context it. I desperately wanted to be enlightened. That was 100% my goal my whole life. Like I was like, I'm going to be enlightened to the point where I don't have a driver's license because I thought I'd have someone drive me around because it potentially could be dangerous for me if I was enlightened. So because I might be like seeing things, you know, like anyway, crazy rational but thinking. But so what happened is there was a time where I wanted to be enlightened, and basically my Zen master got me to read this part of a book called Hoofprints of an Ox, which is like the Bible for Chan Buddhists, which is the Chinese version of Zen. And there was this fable in there because Zen masters just teach in fables. And it was about this student that wanted to be enlightened like me. And so I read it, and basically the Zen master sent him out to do all of these errands that took a year. And he promised him that when he did all these errands, he would find the secret to enlightenment. And anyway, this student goes out and does all of the errands, and he's like, I can't find anything. I'm just being a normal human here. This is really weird. I think my master has just, lied to me. And he went back after a year, and he like threw himself at the feet of his master. He's like, I'm so sorry. I've failed you. I haven't been able to find enlightenment. All I did was just be a normal human. And the Zen master pulls out his stick, because they all have sticks in the stories, and he whacked him over the head, and he's like, you stupid man. That is the secret to enlightenment. Just be a normal person.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. So that was a huge changing point for me. I pretty much stopped taking spirituality so dogmatically. I threw myself fully into entrepreneurship, and I threw myself into being a human, into like just being a bloody normal person. And so what I saw was this disconnect with these spiritual entrepreneurs and these people that were going, oh, I'm heart-centered business, and that means I have to be X, Y, and Z. But they were ignoring a huge facet of what it meant to be human. Like, for example, embodiment business coaches that were women were talking about how we have to be, soft and nurturing and like cool, but that's like 1% of actually what you are. We have masculine and feminine energies in us. Like, why do we not get to play in all of them without them being wrong, or without one being spiritual and the other being not spiritual? Like, it doesn't make sense. So I deliberately went out and did the complete opposite, just to potentially, hopefully, somebody would get it, and maybe it would wake them up to the fact that we are so diverse. Kabbalah talks about, if you want to be enlightened, then embody all 12 archetypes. And so for me, I try to live my life embodying all aspects of my human, the light, the dark, the masculine, the feminine, the happy, the sad, all of it, because it's all needed in a specific moment in time. And if I shut part of it off going, well, I can't use that because it's not spiritual, I'm actually just creating separation, which is the furthest thing from spirituality, or the essence of what it means to be spiritual, which is to be in union, that is possible. So that was a long way of saying it, but that was essentially why I was like, it's all spiritual. Everything is like this idea that this is spiritual and this isn't, and being ruthless in a moment isn't, and being kind is dumb. It's just dumb. I can't think of a more intelligent way to say it. I'm sorry.
I love that. And I love that story. And thank you for sharing it, because I think that is where we lose it, right? We don't know if you're too spiritual, you're like, oh my goodness, there is some sort of connotation with whether it's influence, whether it's power, whether it's money, whatever it is for us, right? Beauty, whatever it is. You look at that as like the evil aspect of who you are, the shadow that should be hidden and suppressed. And so when you get into a space whereby you are required to charge for your services, you are required to charge for your time, it becomes a very tricky dynamic, because I had to face that too, because I teach forgiveness. I teach, this very spiritual concept. And when it came to becoming a business and making that a business part of myself, there was so much contradiction I faced within myself. I was like, oh my God, I'm taking this holy principle, and what kind of human being am I? And I'm like, and at one point it was, I'm a human being who's barely surviving. That's what I am.
Yes, that's it. Like, I read a quote today by one of my clients who is very much in the truth space and the spiritual space. Is incredible. And it said something like, a truly spiritually rich person will be rich in all aspects of life. Like, it's because existence itself is abundant. So this concept that we must stay, God only loves poor people, or the universe only supports people that are poor and humble, is actually ludicrous. It's one of the ways that we are controlled, because our birthright is all things. Like, so Mother Nature is the perfect example. She's a reflection of, we come from the earth. She's a reflection of what's possible for us. So abundance is it's our birthright. And as corny as that sounds, it's kind of the truth. Like, I remember my Zen master, he is such a character. He's still around. But I remember having the same moment that you were talking about. And it was like a good year long where I'd go to him, because I'd sit traditionally on the floor. We would talk about things, we'd read sutras. And I used to cry every time and be like, I don't know how I can be an entrepreneur and be a Buddhist. They seem so contradictory. I'm going to have to choose one or the other. Like, it was just this ongoing, like, he must have been like, I'm so sick of this girl. But anyway, and one day he said to me, he's like, Kate, He's like, we all wear hats. He's like, it's just the nature of existence. Because in the Buddhist tradition we believed in relative reality, which is the reality we're interfacing through, which is our identity, and then absolute reality, which is kind of, I guess, the reality you touch when you reach a state of no mind in meditation, or potentially enlightened. I don't know, I'm not enlightened. But so he's like, we have to interface. He's like, if I went home with my Zen master hat on, my wife would be furious. He's like, that would be a disaster. He's like, I have to change hats. He's like, you can be an entrepreneur and a business person. It's about the intention and the energy you hold towards the things that you do. He's like, the things are neutral, they're benign. Things are not innately good or bad. It's the intention and the energy you put into them. Just change your hats. I'm like, oh, so simple. Touche. Thank you.
No, but it's actually something I think that's going to help a lot of people that are listening, because we aren't taught that, right? Even from, whether remove spirituality from the equation, from the time we're born as young girls or young boys, we are already conditioned as to what our role in society is, right? And yes, I'd like to believe we're shifting it, but it's going to be a very long shift, because as young girls, we are, like, I love Chimamanda Ngozi's quote where she says, why do we teach young women that they have to aspire towards marriage, but we don't teach young boys the same thing? And then we grow up and we reach these stages of maturation whereby a young boy is taught, be career focused, be driven, chase this goal of financial or security, whatever that looks like. And young women are taught to chase men because they are supposed to provide the security and stability that we're not taught to chase, right? And then when you step into that, as I'd like, masculine energy, as people like to refer to it as, and you start wanting these things for yourself, that security, that financial security, or whatever it is, you actually do experience a little bit of resistance from the external world. I mean, I don't know how many friends have told me, oh, you're going to regret this someday because you're not focused on getting a partner. You're not focused on this part of your femininity. And I was like, but who defines that, right? If I'm happy and this is the energy I enjoy, and yes, I enjoy feminine energy, but I enjoy both of them. I like having both in my business. I like, when I'm working with a client to have that connection, but I also love the masculine aspect of building and doing and chasing, and society sometimes pushes us and says, Kate, that thing you're doing,
100% agree. Like, it's one of the most common questions spiritual female entrepreneurs ask me is, they go, how do you manage to be a successful entrepreneur and stay feminine? And I'm just flabbergasted, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, being female, my gender is female. I identify with being female. I can't avoid it. So therefore, I'm going to have a feminine essence. However, so do the men. We have both energies in us. Like, how can I not be that which I am? I'm very confused by these questions. But the point being is that you touched on it really well, is that we have all aspects in us. Like, I love the archetypes principles, the Kabbalah, the 12 archetypes, and you've got the warrior, the lover, the magician, and to embody all of these is the path to freedom. So we must also embody the masculine and the feminine. Like, if my intention is to change the world, right? As is yours and many people. But if we go into a boardroom and say, I have to like raise capital, for example, maybe I'm doing a venture capital something, and I've got to pitch something, and the me saving the Amazon is like wavering on my ability to enter into, say, a masculine like pitching like energy, I'm not going to like get caught up whether it's masculine or feminine, because my job is to save the Amazon. So of course I'm going to bloody embody it. Why would I not? And then if I'm with children in an orphanage, well, then I'm going to nurture them, and I'm going to maybe go into the mother archetype, because that's what's needed in the moment. None of it's right or wrong. It's just what's needed to do our mission. And if you're tapped into your mission, you will free yourself up to be able to explore all the energies without judgment. That's freedom for me.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Oh, so, I mean, there's so much I want to talk to you about, because this conversation is just like, it's so enriching for me. And, when you speak about, like, I love your Instagram posts, by the way. I think they're so honest, they're so authentic, and they're so to the point. And like you, just as I do, hate the overselling that happens on Instagram as to people selling you a reality that's not real, right? They're like, I'm making this much money, but they're not telling you how much of that is actual profit, how much, you know, the company's actually sinking. But they're like, you know, you can do. And it's like, okay, just give like the real, which you are so good at doing. And so when it comes to building a 7-figure business, Kate, like, where does one even start on a mental framework, especially as, like, I think you said the statistic is like 35% of women don't even believe that they can do it. Yeah. So when you coaching and when you start working with clients, what is the first thing you start helping them shift within themselves and within their business?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The first thing we do is we map out, like, it sounds ridiculous, but we map out a 10-5, 2 and 1 year plan, and we build them an exit strategy. So all good entrepreneurs will have an exit strategy. And the reason why is because if you confuse yourself with your business, you're in big trouble. That's the first mindset mistake you'll make. You know, and even something as simple as most entrepreneurs that come with me, the first thing we do is we get them clear on their numbers. Like, they don't even know their numbers. They don't even know what they're making, really. And they're using their personal account as their business account. So the first thing we do is we build an exit strategy and we map out where they want to go. And then we separate them from their business. And the business becomes an entity and a creation of its own. But if you believe you are your business, everything's going to become personal, and you can't make the decisions you need to make in order to scale if you are making them personal. It actually won't happen. So the first mindset thing is actually get people to own they're an entrepreneur. They're an entrepreneur that owns a business. They are not the business. It is separate to them. That's the first thing we do. And that's actually kind of life-changing for a lot of people.
I didn't even think of that. And I think, I mean, I've fallen into that trap so many times where, I am the business. And therefore, when someone challenges the business, I never know if, like, because there's this weird merging and morphing that I feel personally challenged. And I'm like, oh, you know, and then it's like that separation is so critical, because it's like, I need to be secure in and of it myself as an individual entity to say that even if worst case scenario, this sinks, I can still survive without it. And I think so many people, that's where we struggle, right? Because, and then we can't scale, like you're saying, because we're so attached, we're so like ingrained with it that you're like, Kate, what do you mean? What do you mean? An exit strategy? I can't exit from myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's and I mean, and then furthermore, we look at, well, exactly what you just said. How long will it take us to automate your business where you can take 2 weeks off? Whatever that looks like, it's different for everybody. But if you can't take 2 weeks off your business, you have a job. You don't actually have a business. Like, and so all these little mindset shifts of, you know, what do you need? How much money do you need to hire the teams that you need so you can literally remove yourself from the business? Like, these are really important conversations, and they're what most people don't have. They don't even come into their thoughts, really.
And so when people like sign up with you, right, like in a process or in a course, what do you find is the biggest resistance people have coming in versus when you see them, you know, along the lines?
Yeah, so I don't really coach much anymore. So Boss Bitch is a standalone digital program, and I have a high ticket program. It's called Project Impact, where I work with 4 entrepreneurs once a year for 6 months, and we build them scalable, sustainable businesses that they can exit. That's everything we just spoke about. And so at the point they come to me for the high ticket, they've already moved through a lot of stuff. But if I think about when I was working with people that were more in the early, like, infancy stages, and I'd say anyone's in a startup infancy stage if they're still like have a Fred Flintstone business model, which is they're manually running the thing and they can't take any time off. It's still a beginner business. Until you can take time off, you haven't graduated. I think the biggest resistance for them, there's a couple. One is that they don't trust anyone else to do anything in their business. They think they have to do everything. That's huge. And it's the biggest sabotage of all, which is why we get them from the beginning to think about, well, how can you remove yourself from this company? You know, this company has to run without you. You know, what if you get sick? What if you need to go back to your parents? What if you want to have a baby? Like, what if you want all these things? Like, what's going to happen to your income if you can't remove yourself from it? So that's the first one. The second one is people are afraid to invest in themselves. Like, it's an age-old problem. I'm sure you've seen it. I see some people that they get on just just on the border of change. They're about to say yes and move into something that could change their life, and they get scared and they run back, and they stay in that back and forward between making a decision to invest, I'll do it on my own, making a decision to invest, I'll do it on my own. Sometimes I've seen the same people in that for 5 years. And, you know, people worry about the cost of investing in themselves. Well, I would worry about the cost of you being in the same place you are right now in your life in 12 months, in 2 years, in 5 years. Like, that's got to be way worse than investing in a mentor.
Oh, and that's like, it gave me chills because I see it all the time, right? We work in an industry where that is incredibly common. And I mean, for me, I remember when I was doing coaching and I was starting the coaching aspect of my life, it was very interesting as to how many people didn't just want it for free, but expected it for free. And so I did it because I was like, oh, you know, I want to help people. I want to help humanity and so on and so forth. But the things I didn't realize that I later learned was, number one, the people you do it for free with have very different results to the people who pay. Like, I realized that almost instantaneously. The expectations the people who were getting it for free had versus the people who were paying was so drastically different. It was actually like the people who were getting it for free expected me to like shift water for them. Like, if I could be in that process and be the one going to, you know, the perpetrator or the person who caused them and apologize, you know, like, and it was just very interesting that mindset they came with. And the last thing I realized was like the people who came free, and I mean, yes, they still, you know, I mean, they were good people. There was nothing wrong with them. But I found that the shift that they ended up making progressively over time versus those who paid was just, it wasn't even comparable. Mm-hmm. The people who paid ended up investing in even more in themselves. And when I speak about investing in yourself, I'm not like punting Kate and being like, go buy her course or go do this. It's definitely not that, but it's like investing in your health, right? Because investing in buying healthier foods for your home, investing in a gym membership, investing in walking every day. It's almost like they had this investment mindset of, I'm going to do the things that are required to become the person I need to be, versus the people who were just like, well, let me just try this out, because I found that was the mindset. I'm just going to see. And if it doesn't work, I lose nothing. And there's almost a negative consequence of losing nothing that ends up making you stuck. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I always find it very interesting when people come to people like you and say, well, Kate, if you were really invested in humanity, you do it for free. The truth is, free usually does not work. And that's like from my unbiased opinion.
It really doesn't work. Like, the free means, if you imagine, and this is a Muji example, and it's about being enlightened, but it's the same thing with paying. It's like, what happens is when you do something for free is you recognize you're in a prison cell. So you seek out a mentor to help you, but because you don't pay, you don't get the keys to unlock the door and get out. You just redecorate the prison cell. You don't actually break free because you're just dressing things up. Like, it's not changing. You're not actually surviving success. You must invest to have success. So you're not surviving the thing you're actually afraid of. You're just dressing it up, bringing in an interior decorator and making it pretty, so you forget momentarily that you're still in the same crap you were before. You actually have to pay to get the keys. It's how it works.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. And that is actually so powerful. And also, another thing I realized very quickly, and I mean, I got burned so many times, was people do not value free things, period, point blank, period. And I remember I had a mentor who actually said to me, they were like, you know, and they reminded me of incidents because I used to be a promotion girl. And they used to say to me, the people you gave those things to, how many of them were actually actively grateful? How many of them valued it? And how many of them came back like in a space of gratitude? And I was like, none. Like, I'd find the stuff I was promoting, either they'd forgotten on a bench or they were left here or there, wherever, versus the people who paid for the product. They would never just leave it anyway because they value it, right? They're like, oh my goodness, I paid for this glass. It's my glass. You know, so there's ownership. Yeah. Payment equates to ownership. I invest in this, therefore I own the result of it. Versus free, where it's like, nah, you know, and you see it with nature. You see when people have these spaces that aren't properly taken care of and they're not properly, you know, manned, or there's not enough security, people will leave their junk everywhere. They'll do this because it was a space to be in. All of a sudden, when you're paying entry and you're paying for your way there, it's like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
We are communally keeping the space safe.
Yes.
Right.
So true. It's so true. And I get it's such an unpopular thing for many people that are starting. And I feel like I forget because I haven't been coaching in that space for a while. And I know you're the same. And it's kind of, you've got to pay to play. And I get that that's triggering for people. But all the opportunities I've had in my life, including being on Real Success, which I didn't pay to get on Real Success, but I paid a mentor who coached me to be a speaker, who had a contact that got me an interview on Real Success. Now, I stayed on there because I met their criteria and I yielded results. However, I got it because I paid to play. I got mentored by Gary Vaynerchuk because I paid to play. I worked with Cardone because I paid to play. People like Tony Robbins or people you look up to, not you personally, but the people listening that you guys look up to, aren't going to come down from the heavens on a white horse and be like, I've been watching you. Here's a free opportunity. Come this way. It's not how it works. They're busy people. Yeah. You have to pay to get their attention. It's just how it is.
And I love that, like trolloping on our white horses. Yeah. But it's also true in the sense that, you know, like I feel like a lot of people, I mean, your story included, the people I interview on my podcast, they pay with the stuff they go through too. So it's like, I feel like there's a very different mindset to people who've had to endure, who face obstacles, who've had to really shift and change their life, because there's this mentality that life owes me nothing. Therefore, when life, like I always joke with my friends where they're like, oh, this is so hard. Or, oh, you doing that is going to be so hard. Before I published my book, people were like, you can't be published before 30. You can't do this. You can't do that. And it's going to be so hard. And I remember once turning around to a friend of mine and saying, every time I enter anything in my life, I assume it's going to be hard. So when it is, to me, that's normal. I assume that this is the way things are supposed to be to earn your way in, right? And so when you're investing that time and you're having the countless hours, when you're building your business and you are doing the things that no one sees, right? Because they're looking at, oh, Kate can do this now in an hour. Kate can do this in 10 minutes. Kate can do it in 5 minutes. But like that popular story goes, Picasso invested years so he could sketch that painting for you, or like that drawing in 5 minutes, right? So you're not paying for the 5 minutes. You're paying for the years that it took for this person.
100%.
Right?
100%. Yes, yes. One of my mentors who is a really big deal in the online digital marketing space, Scott Oldford. He's great. I love him so much. He's hilarious. But he taught me that I paid him high six figures for a year's worth of coaching, over $500,000. And what I learned from that experience, well, I learned many things, but what I really learned was I was paying for his mindset. Billionaires think differently. People who are at a different income bracket think differently. I was paying to get access to how he thought. Sometimes our calls were 10 minutes. Got what I needed, got off, because we both value time and results. We pay for the mindset. If you want a life like the person you're paying, you really aren't paying for the time they're giving you. You're paying to access how they think and how they do life, really.
Wow. And it triggered something in me where I just recalled an incident last year before I established boundaries, whereby like I had this friend. I mean, you know, we come from a coaching background. So I don't know about you, but I tend to just end up coaching my friends, like subconsciously when they come with an issue. I'm already like in my head, I've drafted an exit strategy, how they can maneuver through it, which coaches they need to get, you know, I've already figured it out, which isn't a great thing. But anyway, so I was like constantly speaking to this friend of mine who was in the same situation and almost had an addiction to chaos. She would always create chaotic situations. And then my brother actually brought it to my attention, my younger brother, like he's super wise. And I remember him saying, he said, you know, a therapist would never go and give therapy for free, because they understand that until it's solicited, until someone comes to you with a mindset of change, they're not going to change. So why do you do this to yourself? Why do you do this in your friendships? And I was like, and I stopped. I stopped. I just stepped back and I was like, not my circus, not my monkeys, I'm out. And it's so interesting that I started seeing the pattern, because all of a sudden I could be objective. And I saw she had a lot of people in her life who were giving her free coaching, giving her free resources. Because in the speaking space, once you get an in, whether that's me or you or anyone else, we so love, but like we're very free with the people around us if they're willing to and they have the time. And I just realized it was a pattern of self-sabotage. She would never pay them, so she didn't value what they had to say, no matter how much they were making in their professional capacity. And that's why I love it when you are like, this is my rate, this is what I charge, this is who I am. And if you want to be in the game, fantastic, I'm willing to engage with you. And if you can't, fantastic too. Like, there's no bad blood. Like, go build it the way you feel fit, you know, because you're not here to live someone else's life. And I think that's the most important thing in this space.
Yes, agreed. Your brother is very wise. That's very, very wise.
I know. I'm like, geez, if I was 21 and thinking like this, like, I mean, my goodness, the amount of things I would have avoided. But Kate, I'm seeing that we're going over time now and I don't want to keep you. But before I let you go, I want to know, like, people who want to get access to your business, that want to get access to you, how do they go about doing that?
Yes, super easy. They can just go to my website, my personal website, which is www.katecgray.com. And then everything's there, including links to my social media and any of my free downloads and my stories, etc. So yeah, just www.katecgray.com.
Amazing. And I'm going to link that in the bio anyway. And last thing before you go, I give you a magic time capsule. Yeah. And I'm like, Kate, you can go back to like 18-year-old Kate. What are you going to say to yourself?
It's a good question. And I actually don't think I'm going to say anything. And here's why. This is weird, I know, because I don't want to change anything. I don't want anything to change.
That's powerful. Yeah. Because you know how each and every event led you to exactly where you are today. And
exactly.
That gives me
yeah, I love my life. I wouldn't want anything to change at all. So I would just kind of like wave and leave.
An 18-year-old, you would be like, who the hell is that waving at me?
Yeah, probably high anyway, so I wouldn't have really noticed.
Kate, thank you so much for your time and how gracious you are, like just sharing of yourself. I mean, I feel like just you being you is just such a gift to the world. And I'm so just privileged to be in your orbit. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do and all that you bring to the world. Like, you are an incredible powerhouse of a woman who's not even 30 yet. Like, you are going to change the world. So I'm grateful for your friendship and to be in your orbit. So thank you.
Wow. I mean, Kate is everything I could have hoped for in a guest and so much more. Her story is truly one of those that you sit back and you think, if life had handed me those same curveballs, would I be able to build what Kate has built? And so she shows us that truly when we dedicate our minds and we really focus on investing in ourselves, how much we can truly overcome and how much we can go on to achieve. Oh, I love this episode. So if you did too, please be sure to comment, like, go follow Kate, and share and subscribe. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next episode.